that bring us really all together today, and to celebrate our unity and our power, and to make strategy to move forward with bold change in our communities. I'm the Flint organizer for environmental justice with Michigan United. And it really is my pleasure to introduce to you all the speakers that we have set for today. We will have storytellers from Flint and Detroit, our very own Miss Emma Lockridge, well known to everyone, most everyone here. She's going to share her powerful story and win in our Detroit community. And we also have Dr. Joyce McNeil on. She's a Flint Public School board member, won election this year. She began with Michigan United and still continues as a Flint public health navigator, helping people to address the COVID pandemic and now signing people up for their vaccines. And if Miss Audrey Muhammad is able to make it on, she will also share, she's from the Flint community, about the impact of racism and environmental injustice for her and her family, particularly related to the Flint water crisis. But without further ado, it is truly my pleasure and honor to introduce to you all our keynote speaker today, Dr. Benjamin Pauley. He is from Kettering University. He's the assistant professor of social science at Kettering in Flint. He is the author of Flint Fights Back, Environmental Justice and Democracy in the Flint Water Crisis. And he is also the president and board of the Environmental Transformation Movement of Flint. He's also a member of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's National Environmental Justice Advocacy Council. Dr. Pauley, thank you so much for being with us today and bringing us our keynote to kick off our discussion.
Thanks so much for that kind introduction, Monica, and thank you to everybody who chose to attend this workshop today. It's a pleasure to be in conversation with you, and I do hope this will turn into a conversation. We're going to begin with a little bit of background on environmental racism, and we're going to hear, as you just heard from Monica, from people who've been affected by environmental racism. But then we're going to talk as a group about how we should understand this issue and how we should respond to it. So I hope you will feel free to and welcome to participate in that discussion. Before we go any further, let me just check with Natalie. I was not able to share my screen, and I believe she has my slides up. Okay, wonderful, thank you. Great. Okay, so Natalie, if you wouldn't mind switching to the next slide, I thought that we would begin with a little bit of history. In 1978, the owners of the Ward Transformers Company decided to dispose of 31,000 gallons of oil that was contaminated by polychlorinated chlorinated bisphenol, or PCB, by driving tanker trucks across 14 North Carolina counties as the oil spilled onto the shoulder of the highway. Once this was discovered, the state of North Carolina developed a plan to scoop up 60,000 tons of the polluted soil and bury it. The site chosen for the landfill was located in Warren County, predominantly African American and disproportionately poor. Local residents and activists organized to block the landfill's construction and used nonviolent direct action to prevent the trucks carrying the toxic soil from reaching their destination. Although the landfill was ultimately built, the struggle to stop it brought an unprecedented level of attention to the disproportionate impact of environmental contamination on people of color and people living below the poverty line, and especially those falling into both categories. The struggle in Warren County is widely seen as having inaugurated the environmental justice movement, and it helped to inspire a related term, environmental racism, defined here by Dr. Robert Bullard as environmental policy, practice, or directive that differentially affects or disadvantages, whether intended or unintended, individuals, groups, or communities based on race or color. Since Warren County captured the attention of the nation, communities all over the United States have fought back against racial disparities in environmental quality. And Michigan has been home to some of the most notable examples. Next slide, please. In the 1990s, a group of Flint residents led by Father Phil Schmitter and Sister Joanne Chiavarini of the St. Francis Prayer Center organized against the construction of a wood-burning incinerator, the Genesee Power Station, that threatened to contaminate the air around a predominantly Black neighborhood on the border of the city with lead and other toxins. Although the facility was built and continues to operate to this day, the effort was groundbreaking in its use of federal civil rights law to argue that the siting of the station constituted an unlawful act of racial discrimination. The organizers filed a complaint with the EPA's Office of Civil Rights that famously languished for 2.5 decades, becoming a symbol of the EPA's failure to take action on environmental justice, until finally, in January 2017, the office found in a historic ruling that racial discrimination had indeed occurred during the permitting process for the facility. It had occurred when Black residents had to travel to Lansing for permitting meetings just to be heard, when they were cut off in the middle of speaking and intimidated by police officers at these meetings. As Father Schmitter put it after the ruling, communities of color and school children have had to grow up near this horrible power plant and be subjected to its harmful emissions. It's unbelievable that the EPA.
What was that?
I think somebody isn't muted. We're getting some background noise there. If everybody could just check to see that they're muted.
Esther J, could you mute for us, please? The Cummings family. There we go.
Thanks so
No
much.
problem.
As Father Schmitter put it, it's unbelievable that it took the EPA decades to make this finding, but it's important to send a clear message to the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality, now EGLE, that it needs to change the way it does business. With a federal administration now in office that is placing unprecedented emphasis on environmental justice, there is a real possibility that the Genesee Power Station ruling will inspire other similar rulings. If that happens, if accusations of environmental racism finally start taking on some real legal bite at the federal level, Flint residents will have played an instrumental role in making that happen. The Genesee Power Station case is not, of course, the only time that Flint residents have stood up and fought against environmental contamination in the face of government inaction. Thank you. There would be no such thing, at least not officially, as the Flint Water crisis if residents, some of whom are with us today, hadn't forced officials to acknowledge it by rallying, marching, petitioning, and collecting evidence of unclean and unsafe water. As with the power station, the crisis was not just about the harm being done, but about how that harm happened. When critical decisions were being made about Flint's water source and water treatment, residents were once again marginalized, treated as if their voices didn't matter. In fact, even their elected representatives were marginalized because the city was under the control of a state-appointed emergency manager. We know that emergency managers are installed disproportionately in majority-minority cities, and that the damage they do to our public institutions, including our public water systems, affects people of color disproportionately. And the whole presumption behind emergency management is that people in majority Black cities can't be trusted to make good decisions about their own environments, or for that matter, about anything of great significance. So we have another situation where racially disparate harms resulted from racialized decision-making structures and processes. But race and racism intersect with the water crisis in other ways as well. We know that Flint struggles to maintain its infrastructure and keep its water treatment plant well-staffed can't just be explained by poor management. They have to be seen in the context of decades worth of disinvestment and neglect, of racial segregation and white flight that led to the erosion of the city's tax base and that made residents vulnerable in all kinds of ways. When the Michigan Civil Rights Commission investigated whether race was a factor in the water crisis, their conclusion, as you see here, was an unreserved and undeniable yes. As the commission wrote in its final report, the crisis was in part the result of systemic racism that was built into the foundation and growth of Flint, its industry, and the suburban area surrounding it. So when we talk about environmental racism, we're not only talking about whose voices matter in decision-making processes. You know, are the voices of Black people, of Indigenous people, of people of color being heard, and are they having an actual influence? But also about the legacy of decades worth of systemic racism that exacerbates environmental harm and creates conditions under which new environmental crises can arise. Next slide, please. We also need to be talking about the cumulative impacts of environmental contamination in places like Detroit's 48217 zip code, where there are great concentrations of polluting facilities, emitting substances like sulfur dioxide, ozone, benzene, hydrogen cyanide, and chromium. Longtime residents of 48217 have watched these contaminants accumulate over the years as these facilities have gotten permit after permit to expand their operations. Residents of the area suffer disproportionately from asthma and other health ailments tied to air pollution. But because we regulate facilities based on their individual emissions and not on their contributions to cumulative impact, residents living within this kind of toxic stew may not have much legal recourse. That has not stopped them, though. Activists like Teresa Landrum and Justin Onwenu have been working diligently to bring attention to these issues and to ensure that everyone has access to clean air, clean water, and clean soil. That objective is ultimately what unites the people who laid down in the road in Warren County, with the Flint residents fighting for clean water, with residents of 48217 who are trying to prevent dangerous toxins from being released into the air they breathe. Next slide, please. So while the form that environmental racism takes is shaped by local histories and experiences, there are connections across communities. There are opportunities to learn from each other and to coordinate our efforts. Thanks to the efforts of people like Dr. Paul Mohai and his collaborators, we in Michigan are ahead of many other states in developing a bird's eye understanding of where our most serious environmental justice issues are geographically. And thanks to the efforts of a robust network of environmental justice activists across the state, there is already a lot of organizing going on around those issues. But there is a lot more we need to understand and a lot more work to be done. So the objective of the workshop today is to learn from those who have been personally impacted by environmental racism and to begin to strategize collectively about how best to join forces and fight it. So thanks very much for allowing me to kick things off this way. And I really look forward to hearing what Ms. Lockridge and Dr. Joyce McNeil have to contribute to our conversation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pauly, for a wonderful introduction to the topic in history and how this connects our lives all together, no matter where we live or reside. The air, the water, it's what connects our humanity. So thank you, and I'm sure we'll reflect more on the presentation you offered this morning. Ms. Emma, we'd love to hear about your powerful work in the community.
Hello, it's wonderful to be here. I have about 10 minutes and I could probably go on for 10 hours. I wanted to first thank Ryan Bates for inviting me to join the Michigan United team, and my supervisors, Nigel Tan and also Ken Whitaker. It was wonderful to hear that music. The DJ play the music, DJ Too Cool Thomas. I wanted to give him a shout out because he played What's Going On from Marvin Gaye's groundbreaking LP, which came out 50 years ago. This is the 50th anniversary. And on that album, he has a song called Mercy, Mercy Me. And generally, whenever I was out speaking about environmental injustice in my community and across the globe, I would bring up that song, Mercy, Mercy Me, because it opens with the lyrics, oh, mercy, mercy me. Things ain't what they used to be. Oil wasted on our shores and upon our seas, fish full of mercury. 50 years ago, he wrote that. We still have the same problems. Marvin Gaye actually is my favorite recording artist for bringing out that album, which touches on a lot of social ills and things that are going on in our community. And so I found myself located and living in an environmental sacrifice zone. My home is based around it, 28 plus major polluting facilities that release millions of pounds of toxins into the air and soil and water every year. 28, that includes steel mills, not one. Asphalt facilities, not one. You know, when you drive your car down the street, you get a whiff of that. Imagine living near the facility that produces that. The Detroit Water and Sewerage Department. Most of us don't think about when you flush your toilet, where does it go? It came to our community. It came within a whiff's smell because it goes there, they process it, and what's left over is called sludge, and they burn it into the air. So we get the burned poop, if you will. And then they also included a new facility where they decided to start baking it. I called it the Queasy Bake Oven, because if you actually drove past this facility in Delray and got a whiff of that, it's something you would want to unsmell the rest of your life. So we had all of these facilities around us, but the largest facility for us was Marathon Petroleum Corporation, which is exactly parallel to our community. Downwind, we were downwind of it, and it was causing us a lot of problems. And the reason I targeted specifically Marathon is because I was able to trace back toxic odors to that facility. I could feel it. It was just all around, permeating in my bedroom. I couldn't sleep at night, tossing and turning, waking up coughing. Everything about it was just made life miserable. And Marathon had undergone a $2.5 billion expansion about 10 years ago or something like that. And they actually bought out a part of the area near the facility in my zip, but it was where most of the whites lived in that area. And so I said that, well, you didn't finish the buyout. You need to expand the zone over here where we are on the other side of your facility, because where they initially purchased homes is where I actually went to middle school. I could walk there when I was 12 years old where they bought the houses. So I'm trying to show you in distance, it wasn't that far if children can walk over there. So I said, you need to whip on over here across this side and buy our homes too, because a lot of the environmentalists in my area have been fighting for, and I really appreciate this, for better air quality, trying to get them to adhere to regulations and all kinds of things like that. For me, it was too late. It was too late. We were already in that burning building. Our soil was contaminated. I lived around the block. My house is located around the block from a 5-acre lead contaminated field where my elementary school was. And I often wonder, did I play on that field? Is that why I ended up with kidney failure? Is that the reason my sister died on a dialysis machine, died of kidney failure? When no one in my family, and I have a huge family, like almost 40 first cousins, no one has kidney failure, but my sister and I had kidney failure. And so my next door neighbor had kidney failure. The neighbor in front of me had kidney failure. Everybody around, you know, so I said, So it was already poisoned. The land is poisoned. The air is poisoned. The water is poisoned. The only thing you could do is get us out of this, get us out. So I was really considered, I learned this, a lone wolf when I started trying to get us out of there. And when I went to Michigan United, that's when I started organizing 4 years ago. Organizing is central. It is important. You must organize, because when you organize, you have to develop a strategy. You never go, for instance, the first protest rally I ever went to, a large one at Marathon, it was huge, huge turnout about 6 years ago. We were out there with signs and all of that. We were out there on a Saturday morning, all of these signs, and we felt good about it, but it was kind of stupid if you ask me, because it was Saturday and no one was in the building. So that's not an intentional way to do something. Every time you protest, you're supposed to move the target, the person, and make them change in some sort of way, or start getting up here. And so if you're out there protesting at somewhere and nobody even knows you're there, it's a waste of time. So when you start organizing, you develop a strategy that is designed to have that organization or facility you're targeting to respond. And that's what happened with us. Marathon would not speak to us for 4 years. And we went to their board meeting. I did. I went into their board meeting. We had protesters outside. And I specifically asked the chairman, would you please meet with us? And he said yes. And after he said yes, that began the process of negotiations to get the yes that we need to get out of there. And I'm just thrilled, last December, after 8 years of my life trying to get them to buy our homes, they finally said yes. And I can tell you, people will again be able, when they move, open their windows to get fresh air. The simple things like that. You will be able to open your window again. You will be able to go to bed and rest, and not at 3 a.m. have a bunch of fumes come in like you're in a chamber about to die and awaken you. You will be able to plant a garden. We could not even have raised beds where I lived, and eat fresh things that you grow. Your children will be able to run down the street or ride a bicycle. So this is giving us our lives back. This is becoming fully human. Environmental racism is done the same reason as when we go back to the Constitution, where we were 3/5. We were not worthy of living a good and decent life. And so by acknowledging that we are fully human, just like the white folks who lived over there, just like they were granted a new start, this is where we have come to. The chief negotiator on this with me from Marathon, his name is Dave. And I just want to hold him up and say he's a very good man, truly listened and really tried to help us work through this process. So again, be strategic, be strategic. You have to do that. Don't just sit down and go from here to here and over there. We had a written plan. I still have it, everything on paper. We didn't just bounce to where we ended up. We followed our plan and we executed our plan. I had 10 core group members from my community, neighbors who worked with me, very dedicated. And so on today, I just want to say I'm giving thanks and for a new life for folks.
And all I can say is, wow, powerful work, powerful testimony, and not just the real true meaning of freedom and life and how they connect, but also this message of we have to keep on keeping on. You shared a story, it took 6 years, but you didn't give up. The perseverance and the hope and the vision that we're guided by strategy made these kinds of things possible.
And I have to just hold this up. This book right here. So my mom is the foundation of everything I was doing, and God, of course. But this book is called Making a Way Out of No Way. It's about the Great Migration. And my mother is in this book and talks about her struggles from Jim Crow to where we lived in Detroit. So, and look back on your history, study your history very well, because your history can teach you how to be successful today.
For sure. Thanks so much, Emma. Ms. Joyce McNeil, it's my pleasure to introduce her, Flint resident. So many hats that she wears, so I'll let her just share her story.
Oh, wow.
Racism and environmental justice have really shaped your life, your work, and your dedication throughout your life and career.
Yes, I want to thank everybody that's on today. Miss Emma, my hat goes off to you. I was raised in Detroit. I remember that area very, very well. And it was always a scary place to be. I recommend that some of us take a drive through there, put your GPS on, because you think you're in a totally different world when you go to that zip code and come back 48202, which wasn't that much better. But when you go over there and revisit your own neighborhood, it really kind of make you feel, special. And I'm so glad to hear the outcome of that. And my story is also about wake up. The Flint Water crisis really woke me up and started me to really think about teaching and thinking a new way. And it took my son's death to get me to that point of what is going on in this world, what is really going on. And when you get a call 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning from out of nowhere, and the doctor said, we need you to come to the hospital and sign your son over to hospice, when you just seen your son looking pretty natural, nothing was going wrong, but besides being bipolar, that journey began for me, because they were talking about water crisis. And sometimes we get in our zone of conflict thinking that the government takes care of us. The government, when, we hear about the water crisis, we're hearing about all of this, but you never see how far it goes when it starts to affecting medical decision. The doctor played a role in this part. They hid some things from me. And it really impacted me, because all I was looking for was the truth. Why did you want me to put him in hospice? And I began to just come out and say, you guys are asking me to utilize my son, and you're not giving me a reason to utilize him. And they said, well, we're not going to treat him anymore. We're going to put him away. And he's been into a third world country. And I'm arguing, going, he has not been into a third world country. I'm just looking at the whole environment. And then they decided that we're not going to treat him for bipolar anymore, because his body is rejected. So my journey began with, what do you do when the government is controlling everything? The government was controlling everything. I couldn't, if I take him to another doctor or hospital, ma'am, we were told by the government, 6 years old and pregnant women. And I'm trying to tell them there's something going wrong in this household with my son. And then I end up going to McLaren, and McLaren wouldn't take him and wouldn't treat him right. But my son, sometimes the best voice in the world is the one that's crying wolf, and he was crying wolf. And he kept saying it was the water. It was the water. And we look at water, it's coming out clear. It looks clear to me, but it was affecting his body. And it got to the point that the medical doctor team would not even treat him. I had to hire a doctor to come into my house. By that time, my son's flesh was being ate off. His skin was falling off of him. His face was peeling off of him. My husband and I found him taping his face back on. The bacteria, it just wasn't lead. Ms. Emma kind of explains this bacteria that was in the water as well. Then the journey became on to human rights, civil rights. Every right concerning Joseph was violated. And it's gotten to the point that people was running from him. And I finally got McLaren to take him because he was at his worst. And when McLaren took Joseph in, I said, I'd be right back the next day. I was told by a nurse when she went to look for my son, the room was clean as though he had never been there. They wiped him completely out of the system. And I get a call from Ann Arbor Hospital. And I said, how did you get them? He said, ma'am, they dropped them off in a helicopter with no medical records, and they just flew back out. First thing the doctor asked me, what country has he been to? And I'm constantly fighting everybody. Joseph has not been out of country. He doesn't even have a passport. And I'm thinking the medical world left me with, is it pre-existing condition? The doctor says not pre-existing condition. Who's telling you he's dying from pre-existing condition? We had to resurrect your son. So I want to tell you what dirty water would do, and bacteria and water would do for people with compromised immune system. It ate his liver, a quarter of a liver left. His heart was in a pool of pus. His immune system was completely gone. The only red blood cell left, the bacteria was eating him up alive. The only red blood cell left was in his eyeballs. His skin was falling off of him. And sometimes as a mom, we just want the truth. If you're telling me the truth, then let him go. All I needed was the truth, but I couldn't get the truth. But the doctor did kind of gave me the truth. And I said, if that be the case, you say he doesn't have a lung, he doesn't have kidneys, he doesn't have anything to survive him. And they put him in hospital, but he woke up and got out of hospital and came home in a cab with his pajamas on. And he couldn't believe that he was dying. That was kept him alive, because he couldn't believe. And when he knocked on my door, he said, you pulled the plug on me. I said, yes. If I'm dying, then you put me to sleep. So when the doctors got in contact with me, I had 48 hours to put my son to sleep. Me and his son literally begged him, and that was the hardest thing in life to do, is to have your son, your kid crying not to put him to sleep, but they only give you 2 bottles of morphine. And then if that didn't do it, they'll send me another bottle. That led me to say that if I needed help, I needed hope, I needed a direction to go. And Flint was just in a stage of reckoning of themselves. And I heard about Michigan United, and I think that we need organization like Michigan United, because it kind of helped me put the pieces together again. It kind of gave me back my mind back, because I had to live with, I didn't have the truth. So when I started to sit around groups like Michigan United, and they work very hard in the community, and I really could trust, and I'm just not just saying that. I fell in love with Dr. Monica, she don't even know that, but their work was in Paul. I was a Paulie. I would go to Democracy Defense and listen, and would just begin to listen and going, oh my God, this is real. How do I get out of this? How do I clear my conscience? I needed to know, did I make the right decision? And so we need organizations like Michigan United to come in and help communities. Before we didn't have it, you listen to Paul and everybody was every place, but now I think we're becoming more cohesive, and my role now has shifted. I got more off into education. We need to bring this type of teaching into the classroom at an early age. We have to start talking about this and having these communication. Systematic racism is alive. It's alive through your teachers. It's alive in your classroom. And I look at teachers, I go into classroom because I understand what poison and lead do with your kid. The average kid in Flint can only maintain attention span 15 minutes. After that, the behavior just go sporadic. And if we don't bring that back to the table, the city of Flint is a special needs, special ed community now, because our kids has been violated. I'm into the rawest core of the rawest. And then now they wants to over medicate our kids, and they wants to do more experiment with our kids. And it's going to take organization like Michigan United and environmental justice, that now we have a platform. We know for a fact what happens. We're not crazy, but we got to get into that educational system and unroot that evilness. When government does wrong and violate your human right, is evil. We have to call it what it is. It's wickedness. And my goal is to make sure that no mom sitting up in the worrying about what is wrong with my kid, and your kid's behavior. No, your kid has been poisoned, contaminated water. That's what's wrong with your kid. It's not that you did anything wrong. It's not that because you're a single parent and all of this here craziness, when the issue is systematic racism, caused me to put my son away, and without a clear conscience. And I have a 21-year-old grandson, which is his son, sit there and watch me beg his dad to go to sleep. And now that he having those same psychological problem, he's drunk the same water, he's dealing with isolation, and I can't make him do anything. I have to allow him to grow out of whatever's going on in him. So I'm just saying that we got a lot of work to do, but I believe that we stick with an organization with a platform that Paul and them addresses everything. And so it makes me look at different things. I work with Anthony with EJAM and different organizations, and we're all crying the same thing. So now when a disaster happened, we know where to go. And I know where to go. And even when I'm doing navigating with the public health navigator, is people are still talking, but yet and still we have to I point them in a direction. And when people, how did you get through this? When people was dying from the COVID, Ms. McNeil, how did you get through that? And I tell them the best healing is the John organization that's fight for your cause. And I said, find that organization that you can go and they don't judge you, they love you, and they know that I cry a lot, but they never judge me, and that's what I love about you guys. Everybody knows me, it's sentimental, but they help me, they put me into program, they nominate me to go do this and go do that. Healing comes from talking and telling the truth. And I don't want to take up a lot of time, but when democracy is taken from us, and we have to fight for that. And I'm at the age now, I can fight. I fight for my young people. I can fight. They're not gonna keep me in jail too long. I'm a senior citizen. And so, and I put my senior citizen card out on them. But I'm fired up for the fight. But let's get this. My goal is to get it into the educational system where we can educate the teachers that we've been kicked out. We've been pushed out. Our children are poisoned. They are dealing with issues. They're not the typical behavior that as a kid is bad. So I just want to say thank you. And we got a lot of work to do, but I think we're in the right place. And this summit is going to bring about a lot of healing. And that's why I take the time to do this, because I'm still in my healing process. Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce. I love you too. You know that. And your story is powerful. There's so many things we can take out of that, truth being one of them. Fighting for truth, the unity, the creation of community, what being a part of Michigan United is about our joint healing together, but it's a healing that comes with truth telling. We have to first say the truth, identify the problem, name it for what it is, racism, all the things that you mentioned. And it's only when we ground ourselves in truth can we move forward to true healing and sharing our story. Thank you so much, Joyce, for sharing your story, for being a part of Michigan United, for being a navigator, a school board member, for walking to the streets, taking this message so that not only are you on a healing journey, but we're healing our community, the very life and fabric of who we are. Thank you.
Hey, and tell everybody, pick up a petition and get on board and run for office. That's how we
Amen.
start a problem. I'm gonna run for the 8th Ward City Council, and I'm pushing young people. Change is coming to sitting at the table. If you're not at the table, you're only gonna get the crumbs.
That's right. Be the change we want to see. Our next speaker and storyteller is Miss Audrey Muhammad, and I invite her to, she's Flint resident, and I invite her to share how the intersection of racism and environmental justice has impacted her life.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sister Audrey Muhammad. I am here to talk about a story about my little grandson. I hope the light isn't too bright behind me, but I apologize. My grandson, not only just my grandson, just us in general, my family here, suffering from the Flint water crisis. But even before the Flint water crisis actually was acknowledged and started, we've always had a water crisis. I was brought up in a Muslim household where I was taught from as a child that we either take our water and boil it before we use it, because there was a lot of things that was already in the water that had even come from the water plant itself. And so buying water, because I did not have a water purification system at my house at the time, I always bought water to use for cooking and for drinking. So those were natural maneuvers for myself and my household. However, I never imagined that I needed to do the same thing for the water that I was using to wash my dishes, wash my clothing. Just trying to get a better light for myself. Wash my clothing, wash my body, those kind of things. And as time go along, my daughter, who had just given birth in January of 2014, her daughter, because the water crisis started right after that with the water switch, there's minor things that I can see affecting her. Most of it is a little of the behavior stuff with the lead. But my grandson, that's now 5 years old, she was pregnant with him. So she ingested quite a bit of the water, which ultimately did affect him. And one of the things that I noticed as he was younger, some of the sounds he was making, okay, they were normal. He appeared to be normal. But as he got to be a little older than one, and of course there was another baby that followed him, there was things that developmentally I did not see happening, like his speech. He had some stuttering. He was slow with speaking and responding. And even sometimes now he get frustrated with the speaking and the services that he gets. So now here we know that we had the other programs that did come into the Flint area to help once the water crisis did start. You had your early learning programs. I requested speech therapy for him. And just by the way, I'm an occupational therapist, so I noticed some of those things. And now I've been blessed to even work even more with children who have been affected by the water. So I'm seeing more things that could happen to them. Some of it is water related, some of it is not, but I can see the effects from the lead tainted water. And one of the things that I know with him, because he has some behavior problems, like I say, because he can't express himself clearly because of the speech impairment. But one of the things that I do know, and that we have to make a change, and I'm saying this too because I've talked to Dr. Joyce Ellis McNeil. We talk almost every day, but I've talked to her even concerning this. One of the things I know, that if your child may have an impairment, however, if academically they're doing okay in school, I know this lighting is horrible. I'm sorry, I apologize. I'm not that clear on here. But one thing I know, that if your child is academically doing okay, they are not entitled to the same kind of services as the one who's having some academic problems. That's a push that we have to make a serious change with. So some of the main things that I'm dealing with in the school, and I know I'm speaking a little different than I did before because I'm learning more as we go along, but one of the things I noticed is that we work with the children with fine motor disorders, if they got sensory problems. A speech, of course, automatically goes to the speech language pathologist. But also, if they have some problems, because a lot of times our children have sensory problems where they don't want you to touch them, or they don't like to touch soft things. So we do things to try to integrate that, like with having them just playing in some shaving cream, something simple as finger painting, things that we think is just normal things that children do, but we don't understand how it affects them and how it helps them to be, as we call, normal. So I noticed there's other things that he's sensitive to, is like the loud sound. So the first thing they want to say, is he autistic? Autism don't have to come just because they have a sensory problems to loud sounds. It can be also affected because of the lead from the water. So there's a lot of things that I saw, as I was blessed to be able to work a small term contract out in Perry schools. And I noticed some things different in the Perry schools, which is Shiawassee County. I noticed some things that we were doing with children there, and I'm thankful to be out there to learn some things, because now I'm able to apply it here closer to home with doing a contract with children. But there's things that we as parents, family members, community can do to help our children. And we know inside the city limits, like the loud sirens that they hear from the police cars. If you go to the outskirts of Flint, you don't hear the sirens. If an ambulance pull up to a nursing home, because it will alert the elderly that something is wrong, they have to turn their sirens off before they get there. So in the city, we constantly hearing more sirens than you're hearing outside. That's a part of environmental racism. Why are we hearing them inside of the city limits more often than we hear them on the outside of the city limits? Those kind of things are a part of that environmental injustice that we as a community, we have to demand a change for our children. And this water, we're talking about the increase in crime. Do we not think that the lead has played a part in that? So we're growing children up now who has been lead tainted. So you take my grandson, I think the cutoff date was November of 2016, but my grandson was born in March of 2016, and he's 5 now. So now he's had 5 years of dealing with being poisoned. And I'm working with them, but I've seen parents out with their children that's the same age or a little older, and I'm thinking to myself, like, oh my God, somebody please help this poor woman or this poor man out with their children, because they're doing the best that they can to control them. But where's the support group for those moms and dads that are working with the children who's been affected? Because it can be overwhelming. And my daughter looked at me, she said, oh my God, you have so much patience, because I'm sitting down working with them, especially now COVID on top of that. And the schools were out all that time. So now you got all these children that's at home, and parents were frustrated. So you got all of those things that are building up. I know I'm bringing up a whole lot of things, but I'm looking at the whole aspect of that environmental racism that happened and occurred. So we got lead on top of COVID here in Flint. And outside of the city, you had the COVID already. I mean, you had the COVID to add in on them. But there's a lot of things. But one of the main things is I would just like to see more support to happen for our parents, because our parents are stressed out because they're trying to figure it out, but they need more direction. And I understand the children, yeah, they got the lead tank. They were really affected because their bodies are still growing. But if we look back, and I look at, I talked about it before, but there was a special that was on that talked about the long-term effects of lead in people. And they did the study at Cincinnati Children's Hospital several years ago, but it was the longest study ever done on humans with the effect of lead. And think about what we're doing. And I'm gonna sum it up by this. I talked to, being an occupational therapist, I do a lot of home care. So I had an older gentleman that he told me, he said he sat in a room, and he looked around the room, he had cancer. And he said around the room, he saw the different sexes, female and male. He saw every nationality he could see in that room, various age groups. And he said the only thing he could think of was common between them is that they all drank the water. He said it has to be water. And he said this to me years ago because I lived in Cincinnati, and that's before the water crisis started here. But I thank Flint for actually bringing to light to the world that there is a problem and an issue that's going on with the water. So I'm thank you very much, Pastor Monica, for allowing me to share that story. And we do have to be the cause we have to be the change and cause a difference. And like Joyce, I'm going to be running too, because we got to have more voices that's definitely grassroots from the community. And I'm not using it for that. I'm just saying that. But we have to be a difference and make a difference. So everyone have to get involved somewhere and make that change. I thank you. Thank you, Pastor Monica. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Audrey, for sharing your story and testimony. Again, very powerful, and you can see how it weaves in your life and in your work, and how you're passionate about, connecting and working with Michigan United and making change in our community. And you also raised a great point around Flint's water. While Flint is in many ways a canary in the coal mine, we are not the only community that has had or experienced contaminated water. And so there is a strong fight across the country with regards to water contamination, safe drinking water, affordable drinking water, that really, again, these basics of soil and air and water are the things that of the environment that connect our entire humanity. So thank you for bringing those to light. I am mindful of our time, and I really thank everyone who's put in the chat, in particular, how the storytellers and how Dr. Pauli's presentation has touched your life and the interconnection of the history of environmental injustice and how environmental injustice connects to so many other systems of injustice and criminal justice reform, the school to prison pipeline that I heard uplifted today in so many ways. I don't want this to be the end of our conversation, because I remember my sister Joyce, who says telling truth and telling story is power. And when we organize people and power and story, we make change. So this is just the beginning. It's another step on that road towards social change. And so even though today will end at 3 in total, and this workshop will be here coming to a close, our work continues. And it's important that we maintain a way to be united and continue to fight and continue to support one another in our communities. And with that, and because of that, and knowing our time is short, I want to at least let Mr. Eric give a final word, wrap up, and share how you all can continue to be a part of environmental justice movement in Michigan United, moving forward in our desire to have a statewide strategy and plan. Eric, you want to share? Wrap us up, take us home.
Yeah, thank you all very much for attending, and thank you for the speakers who shared those very passionate and touching testimonies. As we all know, to bring change, we need to participate in the movement that brings such change. We need to organize communities to build power. So Michigan United is doing that, and the Environmental Justice Department is dedicated in bringing environmental changes in Michigan United, in the Michigan. We've been working with communities in the Tri-City areas, which Emma helped develop. We have Equals, River Rouge, Detroit, which we term the Tri-City areas, which we have focused our environmental justice work in the area. And like Emma just said, there are more than 28 polluting factories in that area. So we are focused in that area, as well as Flint, where Pastor Monica is leading the environmental justice group there, and some of their core team members are here, like Dr. Pooley, Ben Pooley, and others. So Pastor Monica has just shared her email on the chat and phone number, as well as my email and phone number is also on the chat. So you can contact us, and let's keep building our environmental justice work in Michigan. And as you heard the testimony from Emma, it took about 8 years to get a win from Marathon. And if you want to say 28 factories times 8 years, if you are targeting every factory times 8 years, means that by the time we get a win from all those other factories, we will not be able to be alive. Some of us, it will take a long time. So Michigan United is trying to come up with a holistic way of moving these companies all at once. And we have an environmental justice strategy, which will be working with city council commissions to build, to pass a climate resolution, and then to commit to a community-based action plan, a carbon neutral action plan. And if in that community-based action plan, every city will try to tackle the environmental justice issues and other environmental issues affecting the cities. And if you see that if different cities in Michigan have that kind of plan of action, and then they have to implement it, you see that those 28 companies will all be regulated at once in that plan of action. I will not be targeting one company for 8 years and target another company for 8 years and target another company for 8 years. And we have on this workshop today, we have David Haas, who is also part of the Grand Rapids Climate Action, and Grand Rapids is moving towards passing a resolution for carbon neutrality. Ann Arbor has already passed that resolution, and many cities in Michigan are moving towards passing a resolution on carbon neutrality. But there's a big but. The state has laws which will make those cities, even if they have that kind of action plan, it will make it difficult for them to implement. And that's why Michigan United is coming in again to do a statewide legislative campaign, which it will work with different cities and different organizations in Michigan to push for state reforms that will help these cities to be able to implement their action plan. So we're calling you all to join this fight. We have to change those dirty zip codes in Michigan to become very clean zip codes. And please send email to Pastor Monica, send email to me. My email is on the chat, and let's see how we can work this together. Once more, thank you all for attending. Thank you, Emma, for coming. And thank everybody who spoke today and just listening and writing on the chat. I think we'll be moving to the break, to the main room right away. Thank you all. Let's give a hand to all of us. Let's leave the room to the